The stars had never looked so cold. Captain Park stood alone at the viewport of the HSS Defiance, watching the darkness of space stretch endlessly before him. His reflection stared back, a tired man of 42 with gray streaks in his black hair and eyes that had seen too many friends die. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, their fingers moving across glowing consoles as they prepared for what everyone knew was coming. The alarm had sounded 30 minutes ago. 400 warships had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 400 ships against 23. The math was simple. The math was death. "Captain," Lieutenant said from her station, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship systems, "Admiral Command has sent new orders." She paused and could hear the weight in her silence. "They want us to retreat, fall back to the Helix Nebula and regroup with the main fleet." Did not turn around. He continued staring at the stars, at the distant points of light that represented the approaching enemy fleet. Each light was a warship. Each warship carried enough firepower to turn a city into ash. "How many people are on station?" he asked quietly. Checked her screen, though she already knew the answer. Everyone knew the answer. 40,000, sir, mostly minors and their families. 3,000 children under the age of 10. "And how long until the evacuation transports can reach them?" 14 hours, sir. Maybe 13 if they push their engines past safe limits." Finally turned around. His bridge crew looked back at him, young faces filled with fear they were trying hard to hide. Navigator Bay, barely 25, who had joined the fleet to pay for his sister's medical treatment. Weapons officer, whose parents still sent her letters every week from their farm on New Seoul. Chief Engineer Ryu, a veteran whose hands had rebuilt this ship more times than anyone could count. These were his people, his responsibility, and behind them on that station were 40,000 more. "The fleet," said slowly, "how long until they reach weapons range?" 6 hours, sir, answered, "maybe less if they accelerate." 6 hours, 14 hours. The gap between those numbers was 8 hours of hell, 8 hours where the enemy would have free rein to do whatever they wanted to station. 8 hours of bombardment, 8 hours of death. The comm system crackled, and a familiar voice filled the bridge. Admiral, commander of the Terran Third Fleet, spoke with the tired authority of a man who had already made peace with impossible choices. "Captain Park, this is Admiral Command. Acknowledge receipt of withdrawal orders. You are to begin immediate retreat to coordinates being transmitted now. This engagement cannot be won. Repeat, this engagement cannot be won. Save your ships and crews for a fight we can actually survive." Walked slowly to his command chair, but did not sit. He rested his hand on its worn armrest, feeling the familiar texture of leather that had been gripped by 3 captains before him. 2 of those captains had died in this chair. The third had retired after losing his entire crew in a battle much like this one. Admiral said, "I understand your orders." "Then execute them, Captain. That's not a request." "No, sir, it isn't," took a breath, "but I'm going to have to decline." The silence that followed was so complete that could hear the soft whir of the ship's life support systems. On the bridge, every officer had frozen in place. His fingers hovered motionless over her console. His mouth had fallen slightly open. "Captain Park," the Admiral's voice was dangerously quiet, "are you refusing a direct order?" "I'm refusing to leave 40,000 people to die, sir." "Those people are already dead. You cannot change that. All you can do is throw away 23 ships and their crews in a meaningless gesture that accomplishes nothing." Looked at his crew again. Slowly, one by one, they met his eyes. He saw fear there, of course he did. But he saw something else too, something harder. Something that had been forged in 2 years of running, of retreating, of watching colony after colony fall to the advance. "Permission to speak freely, Admiral." "You're already speaking freely, Park. You might as well continue." "When I was a boy, my grandfather told me about our ancestors. He said they lived through occupations and wars and famines that should have destroyed them, but they survived because they understood something simple. Paused. They understood that there are moments when running means losing everything that makes survival worth having. This isn't philosophy class, Captain. Those people on station came here because we told them it was safe. We told them the fleet would protect them. We told them that humanity takes care of its own. His voice grew harder. If we run now, we're not just abandoning them. We're proving that everything we told them was a lie. We're proving that the Empire was right about us, that we're soft, that we break, that we'll always choose survival over honor. And if you stay, you die. Then we die, sir, but we die standing. The calm line went silent for a long moment. When the Admiral spoke again, his voice had changed. The anger was still there, but beneath it was something else. Something that might have been respect or might have been grief. The Defiance lives up to its name, I see. I learned from the best, Admiral. You taught me yourself. A captain's first duty is to his people, all of them. Another pause, then, God help you, Park, you stubborn fool. The line clicked dead. Turned to his crew. They were all watching him now, waiting. He could order them to the escape pods. He could give them a chance to survive. But looking at their faces, he knew they would refuse. They had already made their choice just as he had made his. Lieutenant, he said, open a channel to the fleet. His fingers moved across her console. Channel open, sir. Straightened his uniform. When he spoke, his voice carried across 23 ships, reaching the ears of men and women who had followed him through 2 years of war. This is Captain Park of the HSS Defiance. By now, you have all received orders to retreat. I am countermanding those orders. He paused, letting the words sink in. In 6 hours, 400 enemy warships will be in range of station. Behind us are 40,000 civilians who cannot run fast enough. We are all that stands between them and death. He walked to the viewport again, looking out at the stars. I will not command you to stay. Any ship that wishes to follow Admiral's orders may do so. No one will think less of you. No one will call you cowards. He turned back to face the bridge, his reflection ghosting across the dark glass. But I am staying. The Defiance is staying, because there are some things more important than survival. The comm system remained silent for 10 heartbeats, 20, 30. Then, one by one, voices began to respond. HSS Horizon standing with you, Defiance. HSS Valiant, we're not going anywhere. HSS Steadfast copies, see you in hell, Park. 22 voices, 22 ships, not a single one chose to run. Felt something warm spread through his chest. He looked at who was blinking rapidly, her eyes suspiciously bright. At who was grinning despite everything. At who simply nodded once as if this was exactly what he had expected. Well then, said quietly, let's show the Empire what humans do when they can't retreat. He finally sat down in his command chair. Battle stations. Commander O had spent her entire adult life studying war. She stood at the tactical display aboard the HSS Horizon, watching the enemy fleet grow larger with each passing minute. 400 ships. The number should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something strange settling into her bones, a cold, hard clarity that pushed the fear aside and left only calculation. They're not accelerating, she said to no one in particular. They're taking their time. Captain Lee glanced up from his command chair. He was a quiet man, tall and thin, with a face that rarely showed emotion. In 2 years of serving under him, had seen him smile exactly 3 times. She had never seen him laugh. They think we're going to run, said. They're in no hurry to chase rabbits. Then they don't know us very well. No's voice was flat. They don't. Turned back to her console and pulled up her research files, years of work compressed into data that scrolled across her screen. Her thesis at the Naval Academy had made her famous in certain circles and infamous in others. She had called it the Doctrine of Defiance, and it argued something that many officers found uncomfortable. Humans were most dangerous when they had no hope left. The math was simple. Throughout history, human forces that should have been destroyed often caused damage far beyond their numbers. 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, 150 British soldiers at Drift, the last defenders of Titan Colony, who held off an assault force for 18 hours with nothing but mining equipment and rage. When humans accepted death, something changed in them. Fear stopped being a weakness and became fuel. The survival instinct that normally made soldiers cautious transformed into something else, a burning need to make their deaths matter. The Empire had never understood this. They came from a species that valued logic above all else. To them, retreat in the face of superior numbers was simply rational. Dying for a lost cause was foolish. They could not comprehend a species that would charge into certain death just to prove a point. That misunderstanding, believed, was humanity's greatest weapon. "Commander," Ensign Han called from the sensor station, "I'm picking up unusual energy readings from the Defiance." Walked over to look at his screen. The readings showed power being rerouted throughout Captain Park's ship, away from weapons, away from shields, toward something else. "He's powering up the mining drones," she realized. "All of them." Looked confused. Mining drones? What good are mining drones against warships? By themselves, nothing. Allowed herself a small smile. But mining drones carry cutting charges designed to break apart asteroids. Put enough of them together, program them correctly, and you have a minefield that can shred through any hull. That's insane. Those drones weren't designed for combat. "Neither were we," patted the ensign's shoulder. "Welcome to human warfare. We use what we have, not what we wish we had." She returned to the tactical display and began inputting calculations. Around her, the Horizon's crew worked with quiet efficiency, each officer handling their fear in their own way. Some made jokes in hushed voices. Others grew silent and still. One young lieutenant was crying softly at her station, but her hands never stopped moving across her console. Rose from his chair and walked to stand beside. Together, they watched the approaching enemy fleet. "How long have you served under me, Commander?" 3 years, sir." "In that time, have I ever asked you about your family?" Blinked at the unexpected question. "No, sir." "I had a wife," said quietly, "and a daughter. They were on Earth when the hit Sol, direct orbital strike. 30 million people gone in less than a minute." His voice remained flat but saw something flicker in his eyes. "My daughter was 7. She loved to draw pictures of spaceships. She said she wanted to be a captain someday like her father." Did not know what to say. She had never heard speak about his past. She had assumed he simply didn't have one worth mentioning. "I've spent 2 years running from these bastards," continued. "Following orders, retreating when commanded, watching system after system fall. I told myself I was being smart, being strategic, waiting for the right moment." He turned to look at, and for the first time, she saw something burning behind his calm expression. "Do you know when the right moment is, Commander?" "When, sir?" "Now. The right moment is always now, because there might not be a later." Walked back to his chair and activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the captain speaking. In approximately 5 hours, we will engage an enemy force that outnumbers us roughly 20 to 1. Command has offered us the chance to retreat. Captain Park has declined that offer, and I have chosen to stand with him." He paused and could feel the entire ship holding its breath. "I'm not going to make a grand speech about honor or duty. You all know why we're here. You all know what's at stake. 40,000 people are counting on us to buy them time to escape. That's the mission. That's all that matters." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had softened slightly. "Some of you may be thinking about your families, your loved ones, the life you might have lived if you'd chosen a different path. I understand. I've had those thoughts too." He looked around the bridge at his crew. "But here's what I've learned in 30 years of service. The measure of a person isn't what they do when winning is easy. It's what they do when losing is certain. He sat back down in his chair. If anyone wishes to transfer to one of the evacuation shuttles, speak now. I'll authorize immediate departure, and no record of your request will be kept. There is no shame in wanting to live. Silence, perfect, absolute silence. Waited a full minute, then he nodded once. Then we understand each other. All stations begin combat preparations. Engineering, I want those mining drones ready for deployment in 2 hours. Tactical, coordinate with the Defiance on minefield placement patterns. Helm, plot intercept courses. We're not waiting for them to come to us. The bridge exploded into activity. Officers called out status reports, coordinated with other ships, ran calculations and double-checked systems. The fear was still there, could see it in every face, but it was no longer in control. She returned to her station and began working on the minefield deployment strategy. The math was complex, but the principle was simple. They needed to turn the space between the fleet and station into a killing ground. Every second of delay they could create, every enemy ship they could destroy or damage, meant more time for the evacuation. Commander said suddenly, I've been running the numbers. Even with the minefield, even if everything goes perfectly, we can only buy maybe 8 hours. That will still reach the station before the transports arrive. Looked at the young ensign. He was barely 22, fresh from the academy, with the kind of optimism that hadn't yet been beaten out of him. She wondered if she had ever been that young. Then we'll find a way to buy 9 hours, she said simply. Or 10, or however many we need. How? Thought of his daughter drawing pictures of spaceships, of the 40,000 people on station, waiting for rescue that might never come, of every colony that had fallen because humanity kept retreating, kept surrendering, kept choosing survival over everything else. By being human, she said, it's the only thing we've ever been good at. She turned back to her console and kept working. Outside the viewport, the enemy fleet grew closer. Somewhere on the station, children were playing, unaware that their lives depended on 23 ships and the stubborn refusal of human beings to accept the inevitable. Intended to make sure those children saw tomorrow. Whatever it cost. High Commander OK had ruled the stars for 200 cycles. He sat in his command throne aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest, watching the tactical display with all 6 of his eyes. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strong survived, and OK was the strongest of them all. He had crushed 17 rebellions. He had burned 4 civilizations to ash. He had never known defeat. The humans were supposed to be easy. When the Empire had first encountered humanity 30 years ago, the analysts had predicted a short war. Humans were soft creatures from a gentle world. They fought among themselves constantly, could barely agree on anything, and showed none of the unity that characterized successful species. They would scatter at the first show of force, just like every other primitive race the Empire had absorbed. But they hadn't scattered. They had died by the millions, lost colony after colony, retreated across half a galaxy, and still they fought. Every world the Empire claimed cost more than the analysts predicted. Every victory came with unexpected casualties. OK did not understand it. He was not sure any truly understood it. High Commander, his tactical officer reported, the human fleet has not moved. 23 vessels holding position near the orbital station. They're waiting for their transports, OK said. His voice was deep and resonant, filtered through the translation device embedded in his throat. A futile gesture. We will destroy them long before any rescue arrives. Yes, High Commander. Shall I order the advance? OK considered. 400 warships against 23. The mathematics were so one-sided that the battle barely qualified as combat. It was extermination, nothing more. And yet something bothered him. A small sensation at the back of his mind, like an itch he could not scratch. The human vessels, he said slowly. What is their current status? All ships at battle stations, High Commander. They appear to be deploying some kind of industrial equipment, mining drones, according to our sensors. Mining drones. Yes, High Commander. Several hundred of them, spreading out in a pattern between their fleet and our approach vector. Okay's mandibles clicked together in thought. Mining drones were harmless. They were designed to break apart asteroids, not warships. What could the humans possibly hope to accomplish? It's a delaying tactic, he decided. They hope to slow our advance with debris, a desperate measure but ultimately meaningless. Shall I order the fleet to accelerate, High Commander? No, Okay leaned forward in his throne. Let them prepare. Let them believe their pathetic defenses will make a difference. When we crush them, I want them to know that all their efforts were worthless. He settled back, satisfied with his decision. The humans would die knowing they had failed. That was almost better than killing them quickly. 3 hours later, OK learned the first of many lessons about human desperation. The forward destroyer squadron entered the minefield at standard combat speed. They had detected the mining charges but considered them a minor threat. Their shields were designed to withstand direct weapons fire, after all. A few industrial explosives would barely scratch the paint. The first charge detonated against the lead destroyer's bow. It shouldn't have done significant damage. It didn't. But the explosion triggered the second charge, which triggered the third, which triggered a cascading chain reaction that rippled through the minefield like fire through dry grass. The humans hadn't just deployed random explosives. They had created a network, a web of destruction where each detonation amplified the next. 12 destroyers vanished in less than 4 seconds. High Commander, the tactical officer's voice cracked with something that sounded almost like panic. We've lost the forward squadron, all ships destroyed. OK stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 12 warships, gone, to mining equipment. That's impossible. The charges were linked, High Commander. Some kind of synchronized detonation system. When our ships entered the field, they triggered a chain reaction that. I understand what happened. OK's roar silenced the bridge. For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The High Commander forced himself to calm. 12 ships was nothing, a rounding error in a fleet of 400. The humans had surprised him, nothing more. It would not happen again. Recalculate approach vectors, he ordered. Send the cruiser squadrons around the minefield. Attack from multiple angles. The fleet adjusted. The cruisers swept wide, avoiding the deadly field of charges. The tactical display showed them curving around the human position, preparing to strike from 3 directions at once. And then the humans did something insane. High Commander, the enemy fleet is moving. Of course they're moving. They're attempting to retreat. No, High Commander. They're advancing directly into their own minefield. OK felt his blood run cold. On the display, 23 human ships plunged into the field of explosions. They should have been destroyed instantly. They were flying through their own trap after all. But somehow, impossibly, they navigated through gaps in the detonation patterns. They had memorized paths through the chaos. They had planned this from the beginning. The human fleet emerged from the fire like spirits from the underworld. Their hulls scorched but intact, their weapons already firing. The first salvos caught the cruisers completely off guard. Shields flared and failed under concentrated fire. Hulls breached. Ships died. Return fire, OK screamed. All ships return fire. The battle erupted in full fury. Energy beams crossed the void in brilliant lines of death. Missiles streaked between the fleets, their drives burning bright against the darkness. Ships exploded on both sides, but the ratio was wrong, horribly, impossibly wrong. The humans were not fighting like a force that expected to lose. They were fighting like predators, coordinating their attacks with savage precision. focusing their fire on weak points that they hadn't even known existed. "They're using our communication frequencies," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "They're listening to our orders and responding before we can execute them." "Impossible. Our encryptions are unbreakable." "They're not breaking them, High Commander. They're predicting them. They've been studying our patterns. They know how we think." OK watched as another cruiser squadron fell to concentrated human fire. 20 ships had become 40. 40 had become 60. The humans were dying too. Their fleet was down to 19 vessels, then 17, then 15. But they weren't dying fast enough. They weren't dying quietly. "High Commander," the tactical officer said, and now there was something new in his voice. Something that OK had never heard from an officer before. "The human flagship is breaking through our lines. They're heading directly for us." The HSS Defiance burned across the battlefield like a comet of destruction. Its hull was torn in a dozen places. Atmosphere vented from wounds that would have crippled any other ship. But it kept coming, its weapons still firing, its crew still fighting. At its helm, OK knew, was the human captain who had refused to retreat. "Destroy that ship," he ordered. "Concentrate all fire on the Defiance." Beam after beam struck the human flagship. Sections of hull simply vanished under the onslaught. By any reasonable measure, the ship should have been dead 3 times over. It kept coming. "High Commander," the tactical officer whispered, "what are they?" OK did not answer. He was watching the Defiance grow larger on his, watching it burn through his fleet like a blade through flesh. And for the first time in 200 cycles, the High Commander of the Empire felt something he had forgotten existed. Fear. Pure primal human fear. The irony was not lost on him. The Defiance was dying. Chief Engineer Ryu could feel it in his bones. He ran through corridors filled with smoke and sparks, his boots splashing through water from ruptured pipes, his lungs burning with every breath. Around him, the ship groaned and screamed like a wounded animal. Bulkheads that had held for 30 years were buckling under stress they were never designed to handle. Power conduits exploded in showers of blue fire. The deck shook with every impact as weapons continued to hammer the hull. Had served on 17 ships in his career. He had seen them damaged, crippled, and destroyed. But he had never seen a ship fight this hard to stay alive. "Engineering to bridge," he called into his communicator. "Captain, we've lost primary power. Backup generators are failing. I can keep life support running for maybe another 2 hours, but weapons and shields are gone." Captain Park's voice came back, calm despite everything. "What about engines?" "Engines are the only thing still working. Don't ask me how. This ship wants to move, even if she has nothing left to fight with." "Then give me engines. Everything else can wait." "Understood, Captain," paused at a junction, looking down at his burned hands. The skin was blistered and raw from the plasma fire that had nearly killed him an hour ago. He couldn't feel his left pinky anymore. "Sir, it's been an honor." "The honor is mine, old friend. Now get me those engines." The line clicked dead. Allowed himself one moment to breathe, one moment to remember the family he would never see again, his wife, his 2 sons, the grandchild on the way that he would never hold. Then he pushed the memories aside and kept moving. The engineering section was a nightmare of damaged equipment and desperate repairs. Half his team was dead. The other half was held together by adrenaline and stubbornness. Young Ensign Shin was welding a breach in the reactor housing with her bare hands, having lost her gloves somewhere in the chaos. Lieutenant was rerouting power through circuits that had never been designed to carry this much current, creating workarounds that would have made his academy instructors faint. "Report," demanded as he entered. "We're held together with wishes and prayers, Chief," said without looking up. "The reactor wants to blow. I've convinced it to wait." "How long?" "Maybe an hour, maybe 10 minutes. She's temperamental." moved to the main console and began working. His fingers flew across the controls, rerouting systems, bypassing damaged components, coaxing power from places where power had no business existing. The Defiance groaned around him, her metal bones creaking under impossible strain. "Come on, old girl," he whispered. "One more push, that's all I'm asking, one more push." On the bridge, Captain Park watched the battle unfold on what remained of his tactical display. Half the screen was dead, showing nothing but static. The other half showed a story written in fire and death. 16 human ships had fallen. The Valiant, the Steadfast, the Rising Sun, names that had meant something, crewed by people who had families and dreams and futures that would never arrive. But they had taken 147 vessels with them. The enemy fleet that had seemed so overwhelming was bleeding, confused, its neat formations scattered into chaos. "Captain," Lieutenant reported from her half-melted console, "I'm tracking the enemy flagship. High Commander OK's personal vessel. It's pulled back from the main engagement, but its defensive screen is weakened." Studied the display. The flagship was a massive thing, bristling with weapons, surrounded by escort ships that were supposed to keep it safe. But those escorts had been drawn into the battle, lured away by human ships that knew they were going to die and wanted to make their deaths count. "How many ships do we have left?" "7, sir. The Horizon, the Northern Star, and 5 frigates, all damaged." "And the evacuation?" Checked her readings, her expression brightening slightly. "The first transport launched from station 12 minutes ago. Another 4 are loading now. If we can hold for 3 more hours, they'll all make it." 3 more hours. Looked at his depleted fleet, his dying ship, the overwhelming enemy force that still surrounded them. 3 hours might as well have been 3 centuries. But they had already achieved the impossible once today. Why not again? "Open a channel to the remaining ships." "Channel open, sir." Stood from his command chair. His legs ached. His head pounded from the concussion he'd received when the bridge had taken a direct hit. Blood dripped slowly from a cut on his forehead, but he ignored it. "All ships, this is Captain Park. We've done something incredible today. We've shown the Empire that humanity doesn't break. We've proven that even when we can't win, we can make them pay." He paused, gathering his strength. "But the job isn't finished. 3 more hours, that's what we need. 3 more hours for the evacuation to complete." He looked at the enemy flagship on his display. "I know what I'm asking, I know the price, but I'm going to ask anyway." His voice hardened. "That flagship is their heart, their commander, their symbol. If we can reach it, if we can take it down, the rest of their fleet will scatter. They don't know how to fight without their leader telling them what to do." Navigator Bay looked up from his station. "Sir, that ship is the most heavily defended target in the system. We'll never reach it." "Maybe not," smiled, a tired, broken smile that somehow still held warmth. "But we're going to try, because that's what humans do. We try, even when it's impossible, especially when it's impossible." He sat back down in his chair. "All ships form up on the Defiance. One final push. Everything we have." The 7 remaining human vessels turned as one, their battered hulls reflecting the light of burning debris. Behind them, the evacuation transports continued their desperate flight from station. Each minute they bought was another 1,000 lives saved. Chief Engineer's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, I've got your engines. Don't ask me how, don't ask me for how long, just go." "Thank you, old friend." "Don't thank me yet, we're all going to die." Probably felt the deck shudder as the engines surged to life, but not quietly. The Defiance accelerated, and her sisters followed. 7 ships against the remnants of an empire, flying toward a target that should have been unreachable, refusing to accept that the battle was already lost. On the horizon, Commander O watched the charge begin. Her ship's weapons were nearly depleted, her shields were failing, and half her crew was wounded or dead. But she was still fighting. They were all still fighting. "This is insane," Ensign Han said beside her. "We can't possibly succeed." Thought about her thesis, about the mathematics of human defiance. She thought about all the battles throughout history where humans had done impossible things simply because no one had told them they couldn't. "Define success," she said quietly. "We've already bought 10 hours. 10 hours that 40,000 people needed to survive. Everything else is just negotiating the price." Outside the viewport, the flagship grew larger. The final charge had begun. The Defiance died 3 kilometers from the Eternal Conquest. Captain Park knew the end was coming. He could feel it in the way the ship moved, the way her systems failed one by one, the way the deck tilted beneath his feet as gravity generators gave up their fight against destruction. He could hear it in the silence that had fallen over the bridge, broken only by the steady beeping of alarms that no one bothered to acknowledge anymore. But he was not finished yet. He called into the comm, "I need one more thing." The chief engineer's voice came back weak and fatting. "Anything, Captain." "Overload everything. Reactors, weapons capacitors, fuel reserves. Everything that can explode, I want it ready to explode on my command." A long pause, then, "You're going to ram them." "I'm going to knock on their door, very loudly." Laughed, a broken, painful sound that dissolved into coughing. "Give me 2 minutes. I'll make sure the knock is heard across the galaxy." Around, the bridge crew worked in silence. Lieutenant was still at her station, her broken arm hanging useless at her side while her good hand kept entering commands. Navigator Bay had tied himself to his chair when his restraints failed, refusing to leave his post. Weapons officer was dead. She had died an hour ago when a console explosion tore through her station, but someone had closed her eyes and covered her with a jacket. They were all dying, they all knew it, and not one of them had asked to stop. "Captain," said softly, "the horizon is pulling alongside. Commander O is requesting communication." "Put her through." Commander O's face appeared on the flickering. She looked exhausted, her uniform torn and stained with blood that might have been hers or might have belonged to someone else, but her eyes were clear and steady. "Captain Park, we can see what you're planning. Let us help." "No, the horizon still has engines and weapons. You need to survive this." "With respect, sir, we came here to fight alongside you, not to watch you die alone." Shook his head. "Someone has to tell this story, Commander. Someone has to make sure the galaxy knows what happened here today. That job falls to you." Opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She understood. They both understood. "It's been an honor, sir." "The honor was mine, Commander. Now get your people out of here. That's an order." The flickered and went dark. Through the viewport, watched the horizon turn away, its damaged engines struggling to carry it to safety. The other surviving ships followed, 4 vessels out of 23, fleeing the battlefield with wounded crews and empty magazines. They would live, they would remember, that was enough. "Captain's voice came one final time. "Overload is ready. Say the word and we become the star in the sky." Looked at his bridge crew, at who had been with him since the beginning, at who would never see his sister again, at the empty stations where friends had sat just hours ago. "Thank you," he said, "all of you for everything." Then he turned to face the flagship, growing massive in the viewport, and spoke the last words he would ever say. "Now light the fire." The HSS Defiance erupted. Every system aboard the ship released its energy at once. Reactors went critical. Fuel reserves ignited. Weapons capacitors discharged in a single catastrophic surge. The ship transformed from metal and machinery into pure, blinding light. That light reached out and touched the Eternal Conquest. The explosion tore through the flagship's hangar bay and kept going. It ripped through decks and bulkheads, through weapons arrays and shield generators, through compartments filled with soldiers who never saw death coming. The great ship, pride of the Empire, broke apart in a cascade of secondary explosions that lit up the system like a new sun. High Commander OK survived. He had been evacuated to an escape pod moments before impact, dragged away by guards who valued his life more than he did at that moment. He watched from the darkness of space as his flagship died, as his fleet fell into chaos, as everything he had built crumbled around him. The humans had lost. 20 ships destroyed, thousands of lives ended, a battle that mathematics said they could never win. But they had also won. 189 vessels destroyed or crippled. The High Commander's flagship reduced to debris. The fleet's command structure shattered. And on station, the last evacuation transport was lifting off with the final load of civilians, rising toward safety while ships scattered in confusion and despair. The Empire had won the battle. Humanity had won the war. 6 months later, Commander O stood before the United Terran Assembly. She wore her dress uniform, heavy with medals she had never wanted to earn. Her wounds had healed mostly. The scars on her arms and face would never fade, but she had learned to see them as reminders rather than disfigurements. "Commander O," the Assembly Chair said, "you are here to present your report on the Battle of Station. Please proceed." Stepped forward to the podium. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from every human world, every colony, every station that still flew the Terran flag. They had come to hear her speak, to hear the truth about what had happened in that distant system, in that impossible fight. 6 months ago, she began, 23 ships stood against 400. We were outnumbered and given orders to retreat. Captain Park refused those orders. 22 other captains stood with him. She paused, letting the weight of those numbers sink in. The official records will tell you that we lost. 16 ships destroyed, over 3,000 lives ended. By any military measure, the Battle of Station was a defeat. But the records are wrong. Looked out at the assembly, at the faces watching her with mixed expressions of grief and pride. We didn't fight that battle to win. We fought to buy time. 12 hours, that's what we needed. 12 hours for 40,000 civilians to escape, and we gave them 14. Her voice grew stronger. Every one of those ships, every one of those lives bought minutes that saved thousands. That's not defeat. That's sacrifice. That's purpose. That's victory in the only way that matters. She thought of Captain Park, smiling as he gave his final order. Of Chief Engineer, laughing as he overloaded the reactors. Of all the names she carried in her heart, the names of people who had chosen to die so that others could live. "The Empire has sued for peace," she continued. "Their diplomatic transmission contained a single question: how do we make you stop?" A murmur ran through the assembly, waited for it to fade. Our response was simple: we don't stop, we never stopped. We're human, we break before we bend. She allowed herself a small smile. I believe the High Commander found that answer unsatisfying. The Assembly Chair leaned forward. "And what are your recommendations for the future, Commander?" Thought carefully before answering. "Build monuments, not to victory but to sacrifice. Make sure every child in every colony knows the names of the ships that stood at. Make sure they understand why those people fought and what they bought with their lives." She paused. "And when the next enemy comes, and there will always be a next enemy, make sure they know the story too. Make sure they understand what happens when humanity is pushed into a corner. We don't retreat, we don't surrender. We do whatever it takes, pay whatever price, sacrifice whatever we must. Because that's what humans do." She stepped back from the podium. The assembly chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. The applause spread, building into a wave of sound that filled the vast space and spilled out into the corridors beyond. Outside in the plaza, a monument was being unveiled. 23 ship names carved in black stone, arranged in a circle around a simple flame that would never go out. And at the base, Captain Park's words etched in letters of gold. Tell the Empire we don't do that anymore. Beneath that, smaller but no less important, were the names of everyone who had made those words true. Commander O stood at the window and watched the ceremony. Somewhere down there, families were gathering to honor the dead. Children were asking questions that would take years to fully answer. A new generation was learning what it meant to be human. She touched the glass gently, remembering faces she would never see again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." The flame below burned bright against the darkness, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. And somewhere in the void between stars, in the infinite silence where the Defiance had made its final stand, the echoes of humanity's defiance continued to ripple outward. Forever,